Welcome class to Sylvan 101. Uh, I will be your teacher today, and I'm here to introduce you to a language I created. The name is not originally mine. It comes from the fairy language used in D&D, but I did make it my own, and I did create an entire system because I'm insane, but also because I quite enjoy doing this. And I thought, I'll put it out there, maybe somebody else will enjoy it too. Alright, what is Sylvan? If I can point correctly. What is Sylvan? Sylvan is the super chaotic language of fairies, fae creatures, and other such beasties, which are typically ever changing and chaotic and don't follow the rules of logic or physics or anything we kind of rely upon. So, as you would assume, their language is equally as chaotic and nonsensical. Why would you want to use this? Honestly, I find it's really good for puzzles, presenting players with parts of this language and having them decipher it. It's also good for creating true names for Fae, if you play with true name rules. It's also quite fun for codes, puzzles, props, world building, all that jazz. So I'm just gonna do a quick overview of what this language is, and in future videos, I will be saying that a lot, but in future videos I'll introduce you to more complex systems and inner workings of this language. However, rule number one of Sylvan: embrace chaos, embrace it, do what you want. I'm presenting rules here, but these are rules that I find interesting to follow, and they create a good standard. But once it's out there, once you decide to make it your own, I can't stop you from doing whatever the hell you want. In fact, it's in the spirit of things to break rules. Do what you want. I cannot repeat that enough. Alright, let me get you into the basics. So, this language, as you can kind of see already, is not an alphabet. I believe the term is logographic language. What's the difference? So an alphabet, you will have letters that you combine together into words and then sentences, and the sounds that those letters make convey meaning. A logographic language instead has symbols, and the symbols themselves convey meaning. They do not have a sound. They're not a spoken language, but they're exclusively a visual language. So that means that our language starts with symbols, right here. You can think of symbols as Lego bricks. They are your base component, everything is built on top of them, and each brick, each symbol, is fairly simple. So basically we have here, as an example, we have three symbols. Our first one is an important one. We have the crescent, which means fae creature or fae. You'll see it in a lot of various props that I'll be making in the future or showing off in the future. The other important symbol here is the little X with the circle on top, which is meant to represent a person's body with limbs and the head on top. It means person or undead. Now, whenever I do an overview of symbols, I'll explain why fae conflate person and undead as being the same thing, but that's not important right now. The third symbol is based on the alchemical symbol for fire, which is just an upwards triangle. I know, riveting. But you can use, there's a lot of other symbol types that exist out in the world that you can use as reference to build your own Sylvan symbols. I'm not immune to this. A lot of these symbols, well, not a lot, but a lot of these symbols are referenced from other kind of logographic languages. You can think of things like, for D&D, Druidic, which is kind of symbols etched into nature to kind of showcase natural hazards or animals that are nearby. But you can also think of Thieves' Cant, which kind of indicates like safe houses for criminals and that kind of thing. Or in the real life, you can think of hobo code, which is graffiti that indicates certain buildings as being safe or unsafe or having resources, that kind of thing. So that's symbols. That's kind of what they do. That's their jazz. That's their deal. Now let's talk about glyphs. Glyphs are slightly more complex. Well, slightly. They can get very very complex. But for purposes of today, we have some fairly simple glyphs. Now, glyphs are composed of multiple symbols that are kind of integrated into each other in some manner. You can see in our first example, which uses the Fae symbol from earlier, we have Archfey. Now, Archfey are, if you don't know, very powerful Fae. So, kings and queens of courts, that kind of thing. So, they're basically fairy gods. If you want to call them that, they're very powerful. Now, they're represented by a crescent and this little, like, pyramid up here, the arch. So the translation is literal. It's an arch on the top and then fey, archfey. But its deeper meaning means king or queen or god or that kind of power level. So next up in our glyphs, we have person or undead becomes wizard. Now you can see that I also put magic person. This is because glyphs typically have two ways of being interpreted. One of them is the combined meaning and one is the literal meaning. The combined meaning of the symbol would be wizard or mage, witch, that kind of thing. But that's because its literal description is magic person. This is because it's composed of two symbols. You can see the outline of the circle and the cross, the X of person, but inside the head of the symbol, you can see that there's another circle. So that double circle means magic. Combined together, this is a magic person. So that's the literal definition, and how you interpret it can vary. I chose to say this means wizard. You could choose otherwise. That means something else, like sorcerer, or invent other symbols. Now, we have our first color here. I say first because there's going to be an entire video on colors in the future. Shocking. But basically, whenever you see the eye symbol, which is this oval with a little circle or other oval in the center, that typically means that the glyph represents a color. In this case, the color is red because it uses the fire symbol. Now, as I explained a little earlier, like right before, you can have the combined meaning or the literal meaning. The combined meaning here that I chose to assign to this symbol is red. Its literal definition, however, is fire color. What does that mean? A fire color, that's kind of vague. That means that whatever Fae is writing or using these symbols, this symbol is not necessarily red. It is whatever color a Fae thinks fire is. Yellow, orange, blue, red, whatever. So the Fae might indicate this symbol, and people may assume red, but it could be other things as well. This is not a flaw. This is by design. It's supposed to be confusing. It's supposed to be weird. It's supposed to lead to issues, because Fae like to trap people. They like to entrap people on technicalities. So if a Fae makes a deal with this symbol for like, retrieve me a red apple, and in actuality, they mean a fire-colored apple, and they think fire is blue, that's a breach of a Fae deal, all of a sudden, that mortals have to deal with. So it's by design. Now, if these are Lego bricks, like this is a Lego wall for your build. And then from those walls, you can assemble them together into these messages over here. Messages are interesting because you can write them however you want. I have an example here for a vertical message. This is the same message, by the way, the vertical writing of it and the horizontal writing of it. And what's more fun is that you can read it forwards and back. And typically the meaning should remain the same, and if it's not, that doesn't matter. The confusion is part of the design. It's okay. Now, my example message here you can see uses the archfey symbol, which we saw in our glyphs, But what does the rest of it mean? Now, you see this symbol right here? This 5-pointed symbol? This is the symbol for hand or invitation. So the start of the message says invitation. That's good. Now, this is a glyph. You can see that there's the triangular symbol on top, and underneath it we have this little trapezoid symbol. So the pyramid on top is the symbol for abundance, and underneath it we have the symbol for food. So combined together, we have abundance of food. In this context, this is being interpreted as banquet. This symbol over here is the symbol for host or hosting, so like the host of a party, not the host of a parasite. So this is the, it also has other meanings. We'll go over it eventually, not in this video. And then the last one is archfey, which we talked about earlier. So altogether, this is invitation, banquet, hosted, archfey. You were invited to a banquet hosted by an archfey. That's the meaning. Now, if you read it backwards, it says archfey hosting banquet invitation. It basically means the same thing. It's just ordered differently. That's it's supposed to sound like that. Now, I prefer to not write horizontally. I like to write vertically. And that's because I feel like a lot of symbols slot really nicely into each other, and they make it more visually interesting. So if you look, I also ordered the words differently. I ordered the glyphs and symbols differently. So invitation, the 5-pointed symbol at the top, slots really nice into the little top part of archfey, which means it's aesthetically more pleasing. And fey really like beauty and aesthetics, so it's completely in character for them to write in a way that's aesthetically pleasing. You know, kind of like French does. But, so yeah, invitation, archfey, and then host, banquet. So you are invited by an archfey who is hosting a banquet. The meaning stays pretty much the same. You will notice, however, that when I'm writing horizontally, the symbols are all pretty much equal size, but when I'm writing vertically, the symbols are not of equal size. Why is that? Well, this is not a rule. This is how I like to write this language. But basically, smaller symbols kind of like are linking symbols. They link concepts together, and they're not as important as the major symbols and glyphs. So these glyphs here, they are the important part of the message. Archfey banquet. You could technically write archfey banquet and still get your meaning across just fine. Messages are used typically by fae who are trying to communicate with creatures, mortals, that are used to writing systems. They will typically not write messages in between themselves. And why would they do that? I'll get back to the vertical writing in a second. Why would they write messages like this? Well, fae like to be tricksy. And nothing is more tricksy than writing in a way that your victim can comprehend, but in a language they cannot. So this is written in a fae Sylvan language, but in a way that a mortal who could technically read this would understand. A mortal may not understand the meaning of just individual glyphs, but they may understand a message put together. Anyways, it's a great way to make fae pacts that are kind of bullshit. But returning to the vertical message, basically the smaller symbols are there to basically indicate that they are not the center focus of this message being conveyed, and instead are connecting bigger concepts. Invitation and host are not a necessary part of this message, but they are useful for anybody who would be reading this. So that's why I write them smaller. It also makes it look aesthetically different from the horizontal version, which I think is more interesting. So basically, symbols are your Lego bricks, glyphs are your Lego walls, messages are your Lego tower. They're your final product if you are building larger and larger senses of meaning, trying to convey more meaning. And I think that's a pretty good overview of what Sylvan is like. And future videos I'll be going over all the symbols, what they mean, and how to make a Fae name. Why would you make a Fae name? And in what context would players be able to decipher this? And I've got a whole like lexicon built up at this point, but this gives you probably a good starting point to do your own thing as well and just invent symbols as you see fit. So that's it for this class. I'll see you next time. And in the spirit of chaos, I won't tell you what the next video is going to be. It'll be a surprise for both of us, honestly. So anyways, enjoy. See you next time.